The basement stairs creaked beneath Marcus Ashford's feet as he descended into the darkness below his $20 million mansion. For 20 years, he thought he knew everything about his wife. He was wrong. His hand trembled against the cold stone wall as he reached the bottom step. The air down here was different, thick with secrets, heavy with years of silence. A single flickering bulb cast long shadows across wine racks and forgotten furniture. But Marcus wasn't looking at any of that. He was staring at a door he had never seen before in 22 years of living in this house. A door hidden behind a shelf that had been carefully moved aside, revealing what should have been solid wall. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it echoing off the concrete. From behind that steel door came sounds, muffled voices, the soft melody of music playing, the unmistakable rhythm of human life. His wife, Elena, had disappeared down here every single evening for as long as he could remember. Just checking the wine cellar, she always said with that gentle smile he loved so much. Organizing things. But this wasn't a wine cellar. Marcus's fingers wrapped around the cold metal handle. Whatever was behind this door would change everything. His marriage, his family, his entire understanding of the woman he loved. He pushed it open. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to see. But to understand what brought Marcus to this moment, we need to go back. Marcus Ashford was, by every measure, a man who had conquered life. At 58 years old, he commanded a real estate empire worth over $3 billion. His face had graced the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg Businessweek. His philanthropic foundation had built hospitals in 12 countries. He was the kind of man other men envied and women admired, powerful, principled, and impossibly successful. And yet, for all his achievements, Marcus would tell you that his greatest treasure was his marriage. Elena Ashford was everything he never knew he needed. She was 52, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that held depths he still hadn't fully explored after 22 years together. She came from nothing, raised by a single mother in a cramped apartment in Queens, working her way through nursing school on scholarships and sheer determination. She had no family money, no connections, no pedigree. She had only kindness. And somehow, that had been enough to capture his heart completely. Their Connecticut mansion sat on 15 acres of manicured perfection, a Georgian colonial with ivy-covered walls and gardens that bloomed in orchestrated waves of color throughout the seasons. They hosted charity galas in their ballroom. They had 2 beautiful children together, twins named Oliver and Sophie, now 19 and thriving at Yale. To the outside world, they were the picture of an American dynasty built on love rather than arrangement. But lately, Marcus had noticed things. Small things at first. The way Elena sometimes stood at the window, staring at nothing, her fingers pressed against the glass, as if reaching for someone who wasn't there. The old photographs she kept in a locked drawer, photos she quickly hid whenever he entered the room. Her insistence on handling all household matters herself, refusing to let staff members access certain areas of the house. And then there was the basement. Every evening, without fail, Elena would excuse herself after dinner. "Just going to check on things downstairs," she'd say. And she would disappear for exactly 2 hours. Never more, never less. 2 hours of complete absence, after which she would return with red-rimmed eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Marcus had learned not to ask. Early in their marriage, he'd questioned her once, and the look of sheer panic in her eyes had stopped him cold. She had begged him to trust her, sworn that she would explain everything when the time was right. 20 years later, he was still waiting. The incident that shattered his patience was almost comically mundane. A delivery driver, dropping off wine for an upcoming gala, had made an offhand comment as Marcus signed the receipt. "Your wife wants me to leave the special supplies by the side entrance again, for the lady in the basement." Marcus had frozen. "What lady?" The driver's face went pale. I'm sorry, I thought you knew." Elena had appeared then, materializing from nowhere with a smile too bright and an explanation too quick. "Wrong address. Confused driver. Nothing to worry about." He dismissed it as a mistake. He shouldn't have. After that day, Marcus couldn't unsee the patterns. He started paying attention to the household accounts, really paying attention for the first time in decades. What he found made no sense. Every month, Elena withdrew $15,000 in cash for household expenses. But their household ran on corporate accounts. Staff salaries, maintenance, supplies, everything was handled through the family office. Where was all that cash going? Then there were the deliveries. Medical supplies arrived weekly at the side entrance. Bandages, medications, physical therapy equipment. Elena signed for them personally, always alone, always rushing the drivers away before anyone else could see. When Marcus casually mentioned that he'd noticed the shipments, she'd gone ghost white before stammering something about donating to a local clinic. But Marcus had checked. No clinic in their area had any record of donations from Elena Ashford. The rational part of his mind constructed reasonable explanations. Perhaps she was helping a friend in secret. Perhaps she was embarrassed about a personal health issue. Perhaps there was a simple answer he was too paranoid to see. But the irrational part, the part that had built an empire by trusting his instincts, knew better. Something was very, very wrong. For 3 agonizing weeks, Marcus wrestled with himself. He loved Elena with everything he had. She had been his rock through every storm, his partner in every triumph. The idea of doubting her felt like a betrayal of everything they'd built together. Finally, desperation won over loyalty. He hired a private investigator, a discreet professional who specialized in sensitive family matters. The man came highly recommended for his absolute confidentiality. But the moment Marcus hung up the phone after making the appointment, shame crashed over him like a wave. What kind of husband investigates his own wife? What kind of marriage was built on surveillance and suspicion? He canceled the investigator that same afternoon. If there were answers to find, he would find them himself. He owed Elena that much. The next evening, Marcus pretended to have a late conference call. He kissed Elena on the cheek as she headed toward the basement stairs, then waited exactly 5 minutes before following. His footsteps were silent on the stone steps. Years of negotiating high-stakes deals had taught him to control every sound, every movement. He pressed himself against the wine racks, watching as Elena moved with practiced efficiency through the cellar. She stopped at the far wall. What happened next defied logic. Elena reached behind a shelf of vintage Bordeaux and pressed something hidden from view. There was a soft click, and the entire shelf swung inward, revealing a heavy steel door with a keypad lock. Her fingers moved across the numbers with the ease of long practice. The lock disengaged with a mechanical thunk. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her. And that's when Marcus heard them, voices. 2 women, speaking softly. One was Elena's familiar murmur. The other was younger, lighter, a voice he had never heard in his own home. His mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Was Elena harboring a fugitive? Running some kind of underground operation? Having an affair with another woman? The theories grew more absurd by the second, but nothing could explain a secret apartment hidden in his basement. For an hour, he stood paralyzed in the darkness. When Elena finally emerged, her eyes were red from crying, her hands clutching what looked like a child's drawing. She passed within feet of him without seeing his shadow-shrouded form. The truth was darker than an affair, and more beautiful than he could ever imagine. And now, standing before that door, Marcus was about to learn the truth. He had memorized the code from watching Elena's fingers. His own hand shook as he pressed the numbers, 0-7-1-5. The date of his birthday. His wife had been unlocking her greatest secret with his birth date all along. The door swung open, and Marcus stepped into another world. It wasn't a dungeon. It wasn't a crime scene. It was a home. The space before him stretched perhaps 800 square feet, a fully furnished apartment, warm and lived in and utterly impossible. There was a small bedroom visible through an archway, a kitchen with a humming refrigerator, a bathroom with fluffy towels hanging on the rack. Bookshelves lined every available wall, stuffed with novels and textbooks and medical journals. A small television played a nature documentary at low volume. But it was the photographs that stopped Marcus's breath. Hundreds of them, covering an entire wall in a carefully arranged mosaic. Photos of a girl at every age, a wrinkled newborn, a grinning toddler, a gap-toothed child, an awkward teenager, a beautiful young woman. The progression told a story of a life lived in secret, a childhood documented with obsessive love. And the eyes in those photos, the dark, intense, unmistakable eyes were his. "Marcus!" Elena's voice came from behind him, broken with shock and terror. He hadn't heard her descend the stairs, hadn't heard the door open. All he could do was stare at those photographs of a girl who shouldn't exist. "Elena." His voice didn't sound like his own. "What is this?" Before his wife could answer, a movement in the corner caught his eye. A young woman rose from an armchair, a book falling forgotten from her lap. She was perhaps 28, with dark hair cascading over thin shoulders and features that struck Marcus like a physical blow. He was looking at his own face, softened into feminine beauty. His mother's cheekbones, his grandmother's smile, his eyes, unmistakably, impossibly his eyes. She stood with obvious effort, reaching for a cane that leaned against the chair. There was something wrong with her left leg, a slight twist that spoke of old injury and long recovery. But she moved toward him with determination, with a courage that seemed to come from years of waiting for exactly this moment. "Hello, Father." 2 words. Just 2 words, and Marcus Ashford's entire world shattered like glass against stone. That's not possible. He heard himself speak from very far away. "My daughter died. My daughter died with Lily 28 years ago. They both died. I held the death certificates. I attended the funeral. There was no funeral," Elena said softly, tears streaming down her face. "There were no bodies to bury. Because your daughter never died, Marcus. And your wife, Lily, she survived childbirth. She was murdered." The room tilted. Marcus reached for the wall to steady himself, but his legs gave out entirely. He sank to his knees on the soft carpet, staring up at the impossible woman before him, his daughter, alive, real, standing in a secret apartment beneath his own home. "My name is Hope," the young woman said, her voice trembling but strong. "Mom, Lily, she named me Hope with her last breath. Elena saved my life when I was 3 days old. She's protected me ever since. From the person who tried to kill me." "Who?" Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Who tried to kill my daughter?" Elena knelt beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. Her eyes held 20 years of secrets, 20 years of sacrifice, 20 years of waiting for this exact moment. "Your mother," she whispered. "Victoria tried to kill Hope, and she succeeded in killing Lily. Everything he'd been told was a lie, and the person who told it was the last person he'd ever suspect." Elena begged Marcus to sit, to breathe, to listen before the shock destroyed him completely. Hope, his daughter, his living miracle, helped him to a worn but comfortable sofa. The same sofa, Elena would later tell him, where she had rocked Hope through childhood nightmares and teenage heartbreaks and adult fears. The same sofa where a little girl had learned to read, where a young woman had earned a college degree through online courses, where a daughter had waited 28 years to meet her father. "Tell me everything," Marcus said, his voice hollow. From the beginning, Elena sat across from him, Hope at her side, and began to unspool 2 decades of hidden truth. "I was a nurse," she said. 28 years ago, I worked at Ashford Memorial, the private hospital your family founded. I was assigned to the maternity ward. That's where I first saw Lily." Her eyes grew distant, returning to that long-ago night. "She was so beautiful, Marcus. So excited to meet her baby. She talked about you constantly, how happy you were going to be, the nursery you decorated together, the names you'd chosen. She went into labor 3 weeks early, but everything seemed normal at first." Elena's voice faltered. Hope took her hand, providing comfort for the woman who had given her everything. "The birth was difficult. Lily lost a lot of blood, but she survived, Marcus." She held Hope in her arms. "She was weak, but alive. The doctors said she would recover with rest and transfusions. I was there. I saw her smile at this tiny baby and whisper her name. Hope, because that's what she represented. Hope for your future together." "Then what happened?" Marcus could barely force out the words. "Your mother happened." The name felt like a curse in the quiet room. Victoria arrived 2 hours after the birth. She had Lily moved to a private room, dismissed the attending physician, and brought her own doctors, men who owed their careers to Ashford money. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I had forgotten my sweater in the room. I came back to get it, and I heard everything through a crack in the door. Elena's hands trembled as she continued. Victoria told her doctors to increase Lily's sedation and add something to her something that would stop her heart. She called it a mercy, said she was saving the family from the disgrace of common blood polluting the Ashford line. The baby was to be given to an agency that handled private adoptions, essentially sold to whoever would take her and never speak of it again. Marcus felt vomit rising in his throat. His mother, his own mother. I waited until Victoria left, then I went to Lily. She was already slipping away. Whatever they'd given her was working fast. But she was conscious enough to understand. She grabbed my hand and begged me to take the baby. "Don't let her have my daughter," she kept saying. Promise me you'll save Hope." Tears fell freely down Elena's cheeks now. "Lily died holding my hand, Marcus. I watched the life leave her eyes while your mother's doctors checked their watches in the hallway. I was 24 years old, terrified, alone against the most powerful family in the state. But I had made a promise to a dying mother." "So you took her?" Marcus whispered, looking at Hope. "You took my daughter." Elena nodded. "I smuggled her out during the shift change. I had a friend in records who helped me create documentation, a stillbirth, cremated remains, all the paperwork Victoria would need to tell you that terrible lie. I disappeared that same night. Changed my name. Moved across the country. For 8 years, I raised Hope in hiding, terrified every single day that Victoria's people would find us. Then you found me." Marcus's voice broke. "I found you at a charity event. I've been following your story from afar. The grieving widower, the workaholic billionaire, the man who visited his wife's empty grave every year. I want to tell you the truth, Marcus. I plan to tell you. But when I saw how completely you trusted Victoria, when I realized how deep her control over you ran, I knew I couldn't just walk up and announce that your mother was a murderer. But Elena wasn't the only one who knew the truth. To understand Elena's sacrifice, you have to understand what Victoria did 28 years ago." Marcus closed his eyes as Elena and Hope together painted a portrait of his mother he had never seen, a portrait of calculated cruelty and aristocratic evil. Victoria Ashford had been born into wealth and raised to worship it. Marriage, to her, was a strategic alliance. Children were assets to be managed. Love was a weakness to be exploited in others and eliminated in oneself. She had married Marcus's father for his fortune and tolerated his existence until a convenient heart attack made her a widow at 45. When Marcus fell in love with Lily, a kindergarten teacher whose parents worked in a factory, Victoria's rage had been apocalyptic. "Your mother tried everything to separate you," Elena explained. "She hired investigators to dig up scandals on Lily's family. She offered Lily money to disappear. She told Marcus terrible lies about affairs and debts and drug problems, all completely fabricated. But you loved Lily too much to believe any of it." Marcus remembered. He remembered defending Lily against his mother's attacks, threatening to walk away from the family fortune entirely if Victoria didn't accept his choice. For a brief, shining moment, he thought he had won. He was wrong. When Victoria learned Lily was pregnant, she saw her opportunity. She convinced you to use Ashford Memorial for the birth, said it was tradition that the best doctors in the state worked there. What you didn't know was that every doctor in that hospital owed their position to your mother's patronage. They would do anything she asked. Hope spoke next, her voice steady despite the horror of her own origin story. "I've spent years researching what happened that night." Elena kept everything, documents, recordings, photographs. "After the doctors who killed my mother died of old age, their personal effects were sold at estate sales. Elena bought them. She found letters, diaries, even a confession written by one doctor who couldn't live with his guilt. She handed Marcus a thick folder. Inside were photographs of his first wife in her hospital bed, looking exhausted but alive, cradling a newborn with dark eyes. Hospital records showing Lily's stable vital signs hours after delivery. Death certificates signed by physicians who had never legally attended the birth. A handwritten letter from a Dr. Howard Chun, dated 15 years ago. Asterisk. I have carried this sin for 13 years. Victoria Ashford ordered me to end Lily Ashford's life, and God help me, I obeyed. I told myself it was euthanasia, that the young woman was suffering, but I knew the truth. She was healthy. She would have recovered. I killed an innocent mother to please a monster. Asterisk. The letter trembled in Marcus's hands. There's more, Elena said softly. Bank records showing payments to the adoption agency. Phone logs between Victoria and her lawyers discussing the situation. Witnesses who saw Victoria at the hospital that night, contradicting her alibi that she was at a gala across town. The evidence is overwhelming. Marcus, your mother murdered your first wife and attempted to murder your daughter. And she has lived in your home, kissed your cheek, played the loving grandmother to Oliver and Sophie, while the blood of Lily remains on her hands. Marcus stared at the evidence of 28 years of lies. Every memory he had of his mother now seemed poisoned. Every birthday celebration, every holiday dinner, every moment of maternal affection revealed as the mask of a killer. But beneath his grief and rage, something else was growing. A fierce, burning determination. His daughter was alive. His first wife could finally have justice. And his mother, the monster who had destroyed so many lives, was about to discover that her perfect crime was about to be exposed. Victoria Ashford had no idea her perfect crime was about to be exposed. Armed with the truth, Marcus knew what he had to do. 3 days later, after urgent meetings with lawyers and prosecutors and DNA specialists who confirmed what his eyes already knew, Hope was his biological daughter. Marcus drove to his mother's estate with Elena in the passenger seat and Hope in the back. Victoria Ashford's mansion made Marcus's home look modest. 40 rooms of Georgian splendor, maintained by a staff of 30, filled with art and antiques acquired over generations of calculated marriages and convenient deaths. Marcus had grown up in these halls, never once suspecting the darkness behind the marble and gilt. Victoria received them in the drawing room, perfectly dressed in Chanel, a string of pearls at her throat, every silver hair in place. At 82, she remained formidable, back straight, eyes sharp, smile carefully composed. Marcus, darling, what a surprise. And you brought Elena. Her gaze swept past her daughter-in-law with barely concealed contempt before landing on Hope. And who is this? You know who she is, mother. Marcus watched Victoria's composure flicker, just for an instant, before reasserting itself. I'm sure I don't. Her name is Hope. Marcus stepped aside, letting his daughter move forward. She's 28 years old. Her mother was Lily Chin Ashford, and she's been living in my basement for 20 years because my wife has been protecting her from you. The silence that followed stretched like a wire about to snap. Victoria's laugh, when it came, was perfectly calibrated, amused, dismissive, utterly controlled. I see Elena has finally revealed her true nature. She's a con artist, Marcus. This girl is obviously an imposter looking for a piece of the Ashford fortune. I'm disappointed you've fallen for such a transparent scheme. We have DNA results, Elena said quietly. Independent labs. Multiple tests. Hope is Marcus's biological daughter. DNA can be faked. Can this be faked? Marcus handed his mother the folder, the photographs, the hospital records, the letter from Dr. Chun, the financial trails, the witness statements. 28 years of evidence, mother. Enough to prove you ordered the death of my wife and the disposal of my daughter like she was garbage. He watched his mother's face as she flipped through the documents. Watched the color drain from her cheeks, the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands, the calculation behind her eyes as she searched for an escape route. She found none. These are forgeries. Fabrications. I'll have my lawyers. Your lawyers have already been contacted, Marcus interrupted, by prosecutors from the state attorney's office. There's enough evidence here for multiple charges, mother. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder of a minor. Obstruction of justice. Fraud. You're looking at spending whatever remains of your life in prison. Victoria's mask finally cracked. Her face contorted with a rage Marcus had never seen, or perhaps had never let himself see. You're going to destroy this family over a mistake that happened 3 decades ago? For what? A crippled girl who's been living in a basement like a rat? For a dead woman who wasn't worthy of the Ashford name? That crippled girl is my daughter, Marcus said, his voice like ice. That dead woman was my wife. And you murdered one and tried to murder the other because their blood wasn't blue enough for you. I was protecting this family. Victoria rose from her chair, decades of aristocratic composure shattering. Lily was nothing. A schoolteacher from nowhere. That child would have been an embarrassment, a constant reminder that an Ashford had lowered himself to mate with common trash. I did what was necessary. I did what was best for you. You stole 28 years from my daughter. You murdered the mother of my child. You let me grieve for a lifetime over lies you created. Marcus stepped forward, and for the first time in his life, his mother stepped back. You didn't save this family. You destroyed it. And now you're going to face justice. The doorbell rang. Victoria's face went pale as understanding dawned. I called the police before we arrived, Marcus said. They're here to take you in for questioning. If you cooperate, maybe they'll let you die in a minimum security facility instead of a maximum security prison. But that's not up to me anymore. As 2 officers entered the drawing room, Victoria Ashford looked at her son with something that might have been hatred, might have been despair. You'll regret this, she whispered. Everything I have goes to charity. You'll see nothing. I don't want your money, Mother. I never did. I just wanted the truth. As Victoria was led away, her final look of disbelief and rage etched itself into Marcus's memory. 82 years of privilege and power, ended by a promise made to a dying woman and kept by a nurse with nothing but courage. But justice was only the beginning of their new story. As Victoria was led away, Marcus realized this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention and emotional reckonings. Victoria Ashford's trial became the scandal of the decade, a matriarch of one of America's oldest fortunes revealed as a calculating killer. The evidence Elena had, gathered over 20 years, proved unassailable. Former servants came forward with stories of Victoria's cruelty. Other victims emerged, a business partner who had died suspiciously, a maid who had witnessed too much and been paid to disappear. At 82 years old, Victoria Ashford was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. She would never again see the outside of a cell. But for Marcus, the real story wasn't about justice. It was about healing. He publicly acknowledged Hope as his daughter and heir, standing beside her at a press conference while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. For 28 years, I believed I had lost my daughter before I ever held her, he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Today, I want the world to know that Hope Ashford is alive. She is my child, and she is the bravest person I have ever known, second only to the woman who saved her life and sacrificed everything to keep her safe. Elena stood beside him, overwhelmed by the applause. For 20 years, she had lived in the shadows, keeping the biggest secret of her life, terrified of the consequences if she was discovered. Now she stood in the sunlight, acknowledged not as a deceiver, but as a hero. Marcus took her hand in front of the cameras. My wife didn't hide something from me, he said. She hid something for me. For 20 years, she protected my daughter with nothing but her own courage and love. I don't have words for that kind of sacrifice. All I have is the rest of my life to try to deserve it. The adjustment wasn't easy. Hope had lived in a basement apartment for 2 decades. She had never seen the ocean in person, never walked freely through a park, never felt sunlight without fear. The outside world overwhelmed her at first. There were panic attacks, sleepless nights, moments of profound disorientation. But she had her father now. She had Oliver and Sophie, half-siblings who embraced her with open hearts, who marveled at her strength, who couldn't believe they had been walking over her head for years without knowing. She had a family, and she had Elena, the woman who wasn't her mother by blood, but who had been her mother in every way that mattered. The woman who had taught her to read, nursed her through illnesses, held her through nightmares, and never, not once in 20 years, made her feel like a burden. Marcus established the Lily Chun Ashford Foundation, dedicated to helping families affected by domestic violence, wrongful deaths, and the abuse of power. The foundation's first major initiative was a support network for victims of crimes committed by the wealthy and powerful, people who have been silenced, paid off, or threatened into hiding. No one should have to live in a basement to survive, Marcus said at the foundation's launch. No one should be erased because they're not important enough to matter. Lily mattered. Hope mattered. And from now on, everyone who's been hurt by people like my mother will know that they matter too. The darkness was finally giving way to light. 1 year later, everything had changed. The Ashford estate in Connecticut had been transformed. The hidden apartment in the basement, Hope's prison and sanctuary for 20 years, had been renovated into a bright playroom for the grandchildren Marcus hoped would someday fill his home. The steel door was gone. The walls were painted in cheerful yellows and blues. Where there had been secrecy and fear, there was now light and laughter. Hope stood in the garden on a warm spring afternoon, her cane abandoned against a bench. Physical therapy, combined with surgeries she could never have afforded while in hiding, had worked wonders. She could walk now, without assistance for short distances, something the doctors had once told Elena would never be possible. "I still can't believe it sometimes," she said as her father joined her among the roses. "That I'm here, that I can just exist, without hiding." Marcus put his arm around his daughter. "You never should have had to hide in the first place. I'm sorry, Hope. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't save you sooner. You didn't know because you couldn't know. Elena made the only choice she could with the information she had, and she saved my life because of it." Hope leaned into her father's embrace. "Don't apologize for the past, Dad. Just be here for the future." That afternoon, the family gathered at the newly restored grave of Lily Chun Ashford. For the first time, her headstone bore the truth. Beloved wife, devoted mother, taken too soon, but never forgotten. Beside it was a new marker, in memory of the years that were stolen, and in celebration of the truth that finally set us free. Marcus and Elena renewed their wedding vows that evening, in a small ceremony attended only by family. Hope stood as maid of honor, Oliver and Sophie beside her. There were tears of grief for what had been lost, of joy for what had been found, of relief that the long nightmare was finally over. "You could have told me sooner," Marcus said to Elena as they danced their first dance as a renewed couple. "I would have believed you. I would have." "No." Elena touched his face gently. "You would have confronted Victoria without proof, and she would have destroyed us all. I had to wait until we had enough evidence, until Hope was old enough, until we could survive the truth." She smiled. "I married you for love, Marcus, but I stayed to protect our daughter, and I would do it all again." The basement that was once a prison had become a place of joy, and the family that had been shattered by lies was now whole again, stronger, truer, and finally free. So what can we learn from Marcus, Elena, and Hope? The truth can be hidden for years, even decades, but it cannot be buried forever. The lies we build our lives on will eventually crumble, no matter how powerful the liars or how careful the deception. And sometimes the people we overlook or underestimate are the ones making the greatest sacrifices. Elena wasn't a deceiver. She was a guardian, a protector, a woman who gave up 20 years of her own freedom to keep a promise made to a dying mother she barely knew. What would you have done in her position? Would you have risked everything to protect a stranger's child? And what secrets might be hiding in plain sight in your own family? If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel for more incredible tales of betrayal, redemption, and the power of truth. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that love always finds a way. Sometimes, the real fairy tale isn't about castles. It's about basements, secrets, and the courage to finally open the door.